Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Monday, January 30th, and we have started out a new month. Welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director for the course, and I'll be hanging out with you throughout the month as we talk about a wide variety of different topics about the creation and production of music for games. There's a lot of different topics that we will touch upon throughout the month, and we have a wide variety of projects that we will be working on. So our session this afternoon is a little bit different than the rest of our Monday classes, where we will be talking about the class as a whole. We'll be talking about what's upcoming, what you can expect from the month, and what is expected of you through the projects and the assignments and the work. We will be talking about the role of a music composer working on a game project. Our purpose here is to immerse you into the world of a game composer working on a different type of game project in the first half of the month and the second half of the month. We have two fully working games that you will be creating both the music and the sound effects for. We will also talk about how the music works specifically in the game. And we will discuss how not only the process of the creation of the music, but also how it works directly with the game, and how does the game actually knows which file to play at any one moment. We'll talk about how the person who has the controller in their hand has an interactive control of the game, what that means for the composer and what that means for the music soundtrack. Basically, how do we create music for an experience where we don't know the final outcome? We will be talking about the linear and non-linear nature of games. Most music that you've ever written or listened to or worked with is probably in a linear format, meaning that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. We have very common structures that we put into our music, very well known. We have our verses and our choruses and our intros and our outros, and we shift and change the music over time according to the tempo and the time signature and the bars and beats. And so time and the changing of time over the course of our song is a very integral part to composition. Most of what you do when you are composing a piece of music is you are determining the timing of a note and the pitch of the note at any one point in the song. And so timing is a very fundamental aspect of our music. So how do we create a music soundtrack when we don't know the timing of how long it's going to take for an individual to complete a puzzle or to defeat an enemy, or you give a player a wide variety of options and they can go in a number of different directions. We don't know when you are going to arrive at that scene or fight that enemy. But once you are there and you go through periods of action and suspense and emotional twists and turns through the game story, the overall arc of the storyline, how do you create a piece of music that follows the action of the game when there is somebody else in control of everything? When you give a player or a human a controller in their hand or a mouse and a keyboard to play their game, you give up control of how the game is or the story is going to move and progress, and maybe even the speed of how they might progress through that game. And so how do we create a music soundtrack that shifts and changes according to everybody's experience while playing games? We'll talk about how you might deconstruct your music into elements that can be used and reused and shifted and changed and rearranged in different orders to create an interactive music soundtrack that is going to react to what the player is doing. You don't know when they're going to solve that puzzle or fight that enemy or that boss, but once they do and once they're there, you have a perfect piece of music that is going to play in response to their actions. And so they feel like, or they do, craft their own storyline as they progress through the game experience. And following all the way along, or maybe even leading, is your music soundtrack that is shifting and changing according to what is going on in the game. So we will talk about the linear and the non-linear nature of games. We'll talk about the interactivity of your music in those games, and we'll talk about how you start with the creation of and the production of the music and put it into a form that is going to play back correctly when somebody picks up that controller and plays the game. So the one of the kind of core ideas that we'll be talking about is the idea that music for a game doesn't exist in one single file. We'll talk about the difference between linear media like television and movies and a music album compared to a game soundtrack, the interactive or non-linear nature of a soundtrack for a game. Music on when you watch a film, you put it in a DVD or you stream it on some movie streaming service, there is a 2-hour-long audio file that plays directly along with the movie that represents the full mix. It's the dialogue, the sound effects, and music. And there's probably a stereo version, also a 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound version. And you listen to that movie or watch that movie on your home theater surround system or on your TV or however you watch a movie. And everybody experiences the same thing. When they compose the music for that film, when they create all of the sound effects for that film, it is perfectly crafted to react to the scenes and the changes and the action in the movie. And so you have exact frames and exact scenes and exact timing of all of the music that you follow, different hit points and different changes in the film image. But every time you rewind back and play back through, it's going to be the exact same experience. Everybody who watches that movie gets the exact same experience. And that's the purpose, is to create this one perfect version. In a game, there is not only the music and the image, as in film, where it's kind of reacting to what's going on the screen, but there's also a third component of the human interactivity, where you don't know if somebody's going to go flying through the game as fast as possible. They're absolute masters of the game, and they're hacking and slashing their way through, and they can fly through the game so quickly that they can even blow past content where they might not even experience it. Or there's the person who's playing the game for the first time and they're going around in circles, they're lost, they're bumping into walls, they can't find the next part of the story or can't solve the puzzle or defeat the next enemy, and they are stuck in one spot listening to the same loop of your music going over and over and over and over again. And other folks progress through an extreme slow paces. So there is a wide variety of experiences that need to happen in a music soundtrack or the full audio mix. So we'll talk about all of that. How is it built? How do you craft when you don't know what's ultimately going to happen in a game or the progression of it? Now, you know the full story. You're part of the game team. You're part of the folks that create the game. So you know the game world, you know the game story, but you don't know at any point how the player is going to progress through that. So how do you create music for a story that hasn't completely been written yet? And how do we take our music, and create it in such a way that it can react to all the changes in the game? So we'll talk about a wide variety of topics, but they kind of center around the experience of what a music composer does in a game, what is expected of the music composer, what sort of skills do they bring, what is required as knowledge in this kind of field, give you insight into the job of a music composer, give you experience of that with a couple of different game projects that you can try your hand at, and by the end of it, you will have custom working game projects, Mac application, Mac games, that have your custom music and sound effects working in them. So let's go over here. Hold on. Let's talk about the structure of the class. And if you have any questions as we go along, please let me know. We have our go-to training sessions on Monday and Wednesday. Each week we will meet and have the opportunity to discuss these topics, and each week we'll be discussing your new weekly assignments. So in the second half of our session this afternoon, we'll talk all about your week 1 assignments and what's coming up for each new week. Starting next week, you will have delivered your first round of assignments. So by Sunday each week, all of the weekly assignments are due, and I will then go through and grade everything, and you will have an opportunity to update your music and your sound effects in week 2, and you'll have opportunity to update your music, and you'll be creating all of your sound effects in week 2. And you will basically create and craft a project in the first 2 weeks. And in the second 2 weeks, we have another game project that needs different type of music and a different setup of the music and how it's going to work and kind of function in the game. We will kind of go through the process of starting out in the DAW, starting from a blank DAW session, determining what music we need, how much music do we need for our game, what type of music is it going to need, how is it going to kind of function and work in our game. We'll kind of work through the whole process of how it's going to be. You'll create your own custom music soundtrack. Tuesday sessions will be an overview. Will be an overview of the weekly assignments. Starting next Tuesday, after you've delivered your first round of assignments, each week you have the opportunity of doing a feedback and peer review, where you can take your composition, upload it to a separate assignment that we can, or a separate optional assignment, where we can take a listen to it. I'll load up Logic and we'll load up everybody's music, and it's a great opportunity for you to get individualized feedback. The grading is much more of the cut and dry, how things are working, how things are functioning in the game. What does it sound like? Is it working and functioning properly? Is all of the music tying together? And if you would like more creative input into it, where I can kind of pick my way. Let me shift myself here. Let me pick my way through the music and talk about how it is working, and I basically give you a video review feedback version of your composition of your project. You can submit it to the weekly peer review submission. So look out for that each week. Our Thursday sessions are going to be an open session, come with questions of the projects. I will also be talking about other aspects of how you might create and work with these projects overall. If we have any, get into any other topics about the industry, we can also get into those. So each week, the sessions will be archived. There is a class archive that's going to be released on FSO the day after each session. So we have a Monday and Wednesday session. Those archives will be released on FSO on Tuesday and Thursday. So hopefully you can make it for the live sessions each week. But if not, they are always available for download on FSO. All right, so those are the classes. We will get into all of the assignments. Let me think if there's anything else that need to get to now before we kind of dive a little deeper into all of that. I think I'm fine. So, next thing I want to talk about is give an introduction overall of who I am. My name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director of game music composition. I've been with Full Sail for about 15 years now. Right? Yeah. Now that we've entered the new year. I have started out my history before Full Sail was in music recording and post-production. A lot of it was for was for television and radio commercials. Working on game projects. I have always been a lifelong gamer. I've been a fan and a consumer and a player for a really long time, along with music and sound design and all sorts of different aspects of audio. And trying to figure out how I could combine that together. I know as and later in life, as family comes along and work responsibilities, finding that time for playing games was less and less as I was doing a whole bunch of audio work and realizing that if I still wanted to get some time in there and really enjoy video games, that if I kind of applied my knowledge of audio to the games industry, that I could really jump into a part of the audio and music industry that I was already a fan of and knowledgeable of, and I could find a lot more opportunity over there. It was about, in the past 10 years or so, the tools that are used to make games and the accessibility through the internet to information and honestly free applications and tools that you can use to work with your music and your sound effects and work them into a game and create games. And between the certainly the internet coming along and the amount of knowledge and tutorials and information and access to all of the software, the games industry really has opened up. A couple of big things in the game industry, obviously mobile development and mobile gaming, everybody having smartphones and tablets and new ways of accessing games, whether it's a 99-cent game that you play on your phone or before the internet and digital distribution of games, really the main way you were playing games was buying a $50 or $60 game disc and putting it in your Nintendo or your PlayStation or your Xbox or your PC or your Mac and playing a video game, and they were made by big companies spending big amount of money. And then the internet comes along and mobile devices come along, and you can get games for free, have in-app purchases, you can have 99-cent games, you can have extra downloadable content. There's just a wide variety of new ways for the game industry to have income and create projects and become successful. And that creates a large opportunity for content creators, both game developers and animators and graphic designers and composers and sound designers, to take all of this technology and create some very impressive things in a wide access to tools, like a wide audience of people can get access to the tools to create new stuff. And there's a huge audience on the internet that can download and play these games. So it's created a pretty strong industry overall. And I shifted into that, have found way more opportunity in the games industry than I ever did in music or film or television or other media overall. And so came to Full Sail, and started out in the consoles and the studios, and then Full Sail got on the game audio train. We started a game audio course over in recording arts before music composition degree existed, and then jumped over to music composition when game music composition was being created. So have a wide variety of experience of media and whatever you want to talk about of hardware or software or gear or games or consoles or whatever it is. Contact me and let me know, and we can chat about just a wide variety of different things in the industry as a whole. So let's see, iChat. You can find me at Chris Latham GCP at AIM. You can send me an email. Certainly, those are probably the two best ways of getting in contact with me. You can call my phone, but I am teaching class I'm here teaching class Monday and Wednesday, and on campus teaching on Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, and so I'm often away from my desk. So you can call my phone, leave me a voicemail, but also send me an email to follow up, and I can call you back or I can email you back, and we can set up a time to do a screen share and a chat about any topics that you'd like. Beyond Full Sail, I also have a game audio contracting company working on a number of different game projects. So here in Orlando, Florida, where Full Sail is, we also have EA Sports, or Tiburon Studios, which is a component of EA Sports. So we've worked a bit with them, worked on Madden and NBA Live, 17 most recently, and did a lot of dialogue for them. They have an amazing sports dialogue system for Madden and NBA that we get to work with overall. Also work on a game called Depth, available on the Steam store. It's a multiplayer sharks and divers underwater game, working with music and sound effects in kind of a first-person environment and multiplayer game. So shifted over to the games industry and have found a lot of opportunity, and definitely want to share that and kind of give you some insight into what is involved in this kind of part of the industry overall. So I have two quick disclaimers that I want to get into. Let me take a quick pause before we get into our next topic here. Let me know if you have any questions. Hold on. All right. So, two disclaimers here. Number one, you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. Your skills at playing video games is not of significant import in our class. You don't actually have to be good with a controller or mouse and a keyboard or have played any games or play games regularly to be successful in this class. The skills that are required are the ones that you've been gaining throughout your entire program here at Full Sail. You have been working on your skills of music composition, music theory, the production of music, your DAW, using synths and sample libraries and effects processing and mixing and automation and formatting and bouncing and preparation of your files. You've learned a wide variety of different skills over the course of the program, and those are the skills that we are putting to test in the class. So things that are expected we'll present you with different game projects that require an interactive music soundtrack. We'll show you how the music is going to be set up and how it will play back in the game. And your job is to realize the music in a way that works best for these game projects, fulfills the requirements of how the music is built and formatted and created so that it plays back correctly in the game. And so now, I understand that folks coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with games. There are those that play games all the time. They eat and live and breathe games. They are up on all the newest and latest games and what's coming out and game consoles and the industry as a whole. And that is wonderful because I can certainly nerd out with you all day about the games and the industry and what technology and what's happening in the industry. And I certainly encourage that through the class. And I also understand that there are folks that are going through the class that haven't been playing video games since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing Minesweeper and chess on their computers, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to actually be any good at playing video games to be successful in the class. So, but while we are in the class, we will completely immerse you in the game industry, and we'll be talking about games, and you'll be working on game projects. You have game music that you'll be creating, and the sound effects that go right along with it. So we will certainly talk about all different aspects of the production of games. The other topic that I want to touch on is actual programming skills. Do you need to be able to program? It's a very common question that comes up pretty early in the class. Do you need to be able to program or code in order to be a music composer working on games? Do you need to know C++ and JavaScript and how to create a game application in order to create music for it? And the answer is a pretty resounding no overall, because the skills that are required of you are your skills of composition and the creation of music. Just in the same way that the game developers, the people that are making the games that are hiring you, just as much as they don't know how to make music, you don't know how to make games. And so there's a role for everybody to play in the development of this game. So your job is to interpret their creative ideas about the music and create a soundtrack from that. We'll be talking about how music is built. How do you determine what type of music it needs to be and how it's going to work in the game? And there are technical aspects, certainly, of the technology that is powering these games and how it works together. And there are tools beyond your DAW that are involved in creating a interactive soundtrack for a video game. And so we'll be talking about some of those tools and the technology that's involved in all of that. But the ability to open up a blank notepad or text editor and just start pounding away at the keyboard and writing code is not the same skill or a required skill. Instead, you'll be opening up your DAW, pounding away at your musical keyboard, and writing the soundtrack. So those disclaimers I often want to get out pretty early in the class to let you know kind of what's expected and what's involved in the class and in the development of our music. All right. So what's next? Goals for the class. What are we going to focus on? What are we going to work on? What's expected overall? And just a very few key points for the class. So obviously our first goal is to write music. That's your biggest goal probably through this entire degree program. You are going to be creating music of a particular type. You've been creating music in your past couple of classes. You kind of shift from creating music just for the sake of creating music to creating music for film and a moving image, creating music for a media of some sort, and now we just shift those skills over to another type of creative project, writing music for games. So it's just, again, taking your same skill set and applying it to a different type of media. And as you go through these kind of last classes in your degree program, you should be creating as much content as possible and creating your best works to add to a portfolio or demo reel. And so we have these game projects that are set up for you to create your own custom versions of these games that you can distribute the application. You'll also create a video capture version of your game and your game music that you can post on a website and host and distribute, and hopefully adding more content to a portfolio or demo reel as you progress through. Another big goal of the class overall is to definitely play video games. And this is a very important topic overall. When somebody asks you, why are you playing more video games this month? You say, I am doing game research. Game research is an important aspect of all of this, which means you have to be playing video games. You have to be paying attention to them, not only just playing video games for fun, which there's certainly that component or aspect to it, but playing them with a critical ear of the music and the sound effects, and the mix and the interactivity. How does the music work with the image that's going on screen? How does the music work with the gameplay and the control of the game? This is a very common idea in any corner of the industry. If you are interested in getting involved in the music industry, you want to be a songwriter, you want to be an artist, you want to be a producer, you want to be a recording engineer, working in the music industry, you should be listening to a ton of music. You should be paying attention to all sorts of different types of music, different genres of music, what is popular, what is good, is popular and good. Does that always mean the same thing? What is successful in the games industry? Who are the artists? Who's the record label, the production team? What gear did they use? How did they create their music, their songwriting techniques? Basically deconstruct every aspect of successful folks in that industry. You should get all of your music on your albums. You should be paying attention to the credits of the folks that created all of them. Figure out who's doing the job that you would actually want, and do a lot of research involved in what it takes to work in that part of the industry. If you're interested in the film industry, you should be watching tons of movies, paying attention to who the director is, who the composer is, who the production studio, behind the scenes content. If you can get your hands on any information of the music, the creation, the intention of it, basically, again, watch the credits and figure out who are all the people that are involved. And then all of that applies to the games industry. If you're interested in working in games, then you should be playing a lot of video games. You should be paying attention to the credits of who is the music composer, who's the sound designer, who's the game team, who's the game publisher, what is the technology behind the game. This is all important elements of being involved in an industry that has a common language of games, music, film, stories, that you can reference, that you can basically interpret the ideas of your client into actual music. Because just in the same way as a music producer, they speak in terms of previous projects. musicians, recording engineers, music producers. They talk about, hey, did you hear that kick drum sound? Did you hear that background vocal technique? Did you hear that key change when it went from the chorus to the bridge? Did you hear just they talk in terms of previous music, previous albums, previous songs. Film directors talk in terms of previous movies, and game clients, game developers talk in terms of previous games. So if you have that language of games, it just makes your life easier in understanding their intention of what they mean when they reference other games, other projects, and other music. In all of this game playing and music writing, there's also a lot to be learned in all of this. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of craft and workflow and technique involved in the production of a music soundtrack for a game, because not only is there the music component, but that music serves an image, and that music also serves the interactivity of the game. So we will be combining all of those elements together for a game project that follows the storyline, follows the emotion, and follows the action in the game. All right, so that's kind of our intention on what to expect for the class, and what the class kind of expects from you. And let's turn our attention towards the assignments for the month. We'll talk about the month as a whole, and then we will get into specific assignments as we go. So let's see. First and foremost, please take the opportunity to download all of the assignments for week 1 as soon as possible. I know that having a class on Monday and Wednesday, and the first Monday kind of springs it on you that we have the class, and but as soon as you can get access to either the live class or the archive, download all the material for the week, and we'll talk about your first game this week called 2D Platformer. Hopefully you downloaded the game. You can open up and play the game. There's a movie of the game, like a video capture of the game, so that you can see what it's all about. There is a PDF, and we'll dive into all of this stuff here in just a bit. But there is a PDF of how the music is going to work in the game, how things are to be set up, and then we'll kind of work our way through how the music is going to work, and what files you will be delivering back up to FSO. There is a series of videos called 2D Platformer Session Preparation that kind of outlines an approach to how the music can be set up. It kind of goes through a DAW session and a composition, and how you can start from zero and start building your different tracks into all of the final assets that you need for the game. Kind of gives you a step-by-step process through how that works. Our second assignment for the week, we have 2 graded assignments. The 2D Platformer game composition, where you will be composing all of the music and delivering the asset files, and a looping game music assignment that has you going through the process of creating a music loops for a game with a couple of different editing techniques. So all of the files are provided. All of the raw assets, whether it's MIDI or whether it is a longer audio file. And there's a couple of different techniques for creating music loops that we will be applying to all of our game projects, because a music loop, a file that is able to loop when it reaches the end musically, it makes sense to return back to the beginning. It's kind of a coherent, seamless transition from the end of a file back to the beginning, so that you can repeatedly play this as many times as you want. Sometimes in games, they'll have a WAV file that'll be 3 or 4 minutes long that is a music loop that will play repeatedly as the player is solving a game level, solving a puzzle, or fighting an enemy. It will loop, and it will need to musically make sense when it reaches the end and returns back to the top. So music loops are an integral part of the design of a music soundtrack because it allows us to musically stay in one place while we wait for the player to do something, and we can then transition and move on once they've solved that puzzle. So these different looping techniques are going to be very important and can be applied to all of your projects throughout the month. As I mentioned before, there is an optional feedback and peer review discussion post. So once you have completed your 2D platformer game composition, you can submit your files in a specific format so that we can take a listen to them as we play them in the game. So I will load up your individual files in Logic, and we'll just kind of go through track by track each person's compositions. You will deliver to me the final bounced versions, and we'll load them up and kind of play them back like the game would and discuss how they sound and your overall approach. So we have access to Logic. Let's see, where's my mouse? Do I have Logic open? There we go. Right, so I'll load up everybody's project on different tracks, and we'll just kind of talk our way through and play them one by one. Of course, they wouldn't all be playing at the same time, so I would play them one by one. And this gives you a great opportunity for us to kind of discuss it in a visual sense, a recorded, much more the creative insight. The delivery of your composition is the technical and objective delivery of the correct assets. And if you want to get some more creative insight, want me to talk about the content of your harmony and melody and how it all works together, this is a great opportunity for us to do it that way. Also, if you want to set up a one-on-one conversation, or if you want to post comments back and forth on the FSO, your FSO assignment, then we can, any sort of which way that we can kind of give appropriate feedback for your project. So maybe if you don't, this process is completely optional. So if you don't want me to go through it in a live class, if you want to do it in another way, that's perfectly acceptable also. But do understand that this is a great way for not only for you to get kind of, if you can come to the live class, then you can ask questions and we can kind of talk about it back and forth. If you can only catch the archive, then you'll still see me kind of click my way through it and talk about all sorts of different aspects. And even if you don't submit, you'll also get to see everybody else's submission. So we'll see a wide variety of different approaches, different compositional techniques and different ideas in how this might work. So, and we'll talk overall as a group, we'll say, hey, maybe avoid this direction and head in this direction, and give us a lot of good ideas to talk about. So please take the opportunity to submit. Each week we'll have that available. Let me switch back to here. Each week we'll have an optional feedback and peer review available for you to submit. Here is, you probably have found this online, the link to the virtual classes and a couple of extra videos and suggested chapters to read in the text. You do have access to the Composer's Guide to Game Music by Winifred Phillips, and there's great additional information about a lot of the topics that we dive into, and it kind of gives another insight into it and gives a lot of great examples. We won't go as thoroughly through this. We'll wait till next week as we talk about week 2 and 3 and 4. But I do want to point out that next week you'll be doing the sound design for 2D platformer. So this week we'll talk about the game, the music, how it's going to be built. You will submit your first round of music, and you'll have an opportunity after we do the peer review and feedback that you'll have an opportunity to provide a revised version of your music. So you have the sound design assignment where you will submit your work. 2D platformer game capture. Your other assignment here will have you place the music in the game application. So once all of the assets are created, there is a very specific place in the game itself that you will place all of your audio files, and then the next time you run the game, it will play it back correctly, assuming that all of your files have been bounced properly, named and formatted correctly, and located in the correct folder. The next time you run the application, everything should work. And at that point, you test it and you see if it does work. Is the music playing back correctly? Is it looping properly? Is it seamless? There's no kind of hiccups or gaps or pops in it. You will be placing the music in the game, testing it out, and once it is working correctly, then you will use QuickTime to do a screen capture of the game playing. We'll also talk about the process of capturing the audio from the game, and you'll provide a video down here in the 2D platformer composition description. You'll take all of the assets that you've created through these 2 weeks so far, and you'll kind of deliver the final version of it with a bit of information on the composition, telling me what key you're in, what your tempo and time signature, giving me screenshots, and providing me information about the looping files, and you'll provide me not only the finished audio files, but information and screenshots of how you set it up. And then in week 3 and 4, it's a very similar setup, but we have a brand new game called Angry Bots, and it's a new game, new type of gameplay, requires a new music soundtrack for the game, and a new overall approach. So we'll get into week 3 and week 4 as we progress into those weeks, but I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of how things lay out throughout the week. So if you have any questions, again, please download all of the material as soon as you can in the beginning of each week, and take a look through all of the materials, play the games, make sure everything's technically working. In our Monday sessions, I'll kind of lay out what's in store for you through the week. In the Wednesday session, hopefully you can have tested a few things out, maybe get some ideas together, and if you have any questions, let me know. And you can set up times for screen shares and video, not video, but go to training kind of meetings, and do some email messages back and forth, whatever information that you need. Please get in contact with me earlier in the week, through the week. I'm not really going to be very much help through the weekends, although I am teaching on Saturdays this week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday on campus, so it might actually be attached to my computer. But typically not very accessible over the weekend, so please get in contact with me, or on Monday, maybe in the live session or through email. We can certainly work out any issues that we need to. All right, let's get into our weekly assignments, what you can expect from our game projects, and we are going to talk about our first game called 2D Platformer. Before I get into this, I'll just play the video here, and you probably won't hear any audio because I don't have that set up, but no, I don't have that set up. So, but we'll actually play it here, and you can listen to it here in just a bit. Let me get a few things set up. Actually, you know what? I think I might know how to do this so you can hear it. Hold on. Let me get my other version. Do this and turn this down. Let's see if this plays. The answer is no, it does not play.
Bring it on.
There we go. All right.
Keep it classy.
So this is 2D platformer. I'm going to let this run for just a second. I'm going to take another quick pause. I'm going to set this up to loop just in case. Where's loop? There it is. All right, and I'll be back in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit more about the game.
Keep it classy. I say, old bean. Bring it on. I say, old bean. Bring it on. Keep it classy. Oh. Ow, 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 ow. I say, old bean.
All right, so this is a 2D platformer, your first game project, and it is made by a company called Unity Games. They have a piece of software called, or a game engine called the Unity Game Engine, and it is the main tool that is used to create this game. The Unity Game Engine is a very popular game tool that is used to develop a lot of games on the iOS and Android store. It's very popular for mobile game devices, but it can also run on PCs and Mac and game consoles. We'll be talking about game engines and the technology behind a lot of these games and how it all works together. Like how does your, we'll certainly talk about how your music is created, and you know how to create and build a WAV file, but how do you actually put it into the game so that somebody can play the game and hear your music, so that when somebody clicks a button, it plays back the correct file. So not only are we going to be talking about the compositional aspects of your music, but also the technology that runs everything in the background. So Unity Games, they made this Unity game engine that they can sell to folks that want to make a game. The Unity game engine is kind of like saying Pro Tools or Logic. It's one of the main tools that folks use to make games, just in the same way as Pro Tools and Logic is the main tool that people use to make music. Other popular game engines, we'll also talk about the Unreal game engine. There is the Source game engine. There is Source game engine is is Valve's game engine. They make Team Fortress, Left 4 Dead, Counter-Strike. There is Half-Life and Portal. There's a lot of very popular games made with the Source engine. We'll talk about the Unreal game engine. A whole lot of popular games made with that game engine also. So, in order to show off their game technology, they create a game, and that they have a lot of different game projects that you can use and tear apart and place your own music in, and basically see how they created everything. And one of those game projects is called 2D Platformer. And it didn't really have a music setup. It was kind of simple in its audio, but we expanded it with a full interactive music system that works very well for our particular project and our setup of our game. So Like I said, you'll be creating all of the music and sound effects for this game. It is a pretty silly game. It's pretty wacky overall. It's a simple game, and it's a great game to start out with as a first project. It is called 2D Platformer because it is a 2D platforming game. The main purpose here is to run and jump, and either a lot of times it's shooting or punching or jumping on a character's head. You're jumping from platform to platform to go through a level, game level, and the music can shift and change according to your score, your health, or how much danger you are in, or how many enemies are around. So we'll talk about specifically how the music works in these games. And 2D platformer games are quite popular in the game industry. They certainly were in earlier games. They have their history in Super Mario Brothers and Metroid and Mega Man and Donkey Kong and lots of very classic Castlevania, lots of very classic games, and are still very popular today. And they are more of a simpler approach. Certainly games can get very complex and advanced overall, but even specific to our 2D platformer, it's really a quite simple approach. There's really no end to it. It's not a full, complete game. It is very indicative of what you would get during the game development, right? You don't get the luxury of working on a full, complete, finished game because it's being created as you're working on it. It's like you don't wait until the end of the movie and to start composing music for it. So you'll get pieces and parts of a game overall. There's no ending. The score just keeps ticking up and up. But it's a fun, interesting gameplay, and it gives us a great opportunity for our music. So let's talk about the music and how it's set up and what's going on here. You are the main character here. You are a bean with a... Where's my mouse? You are a bean with a bazooka and a top hat and a monocle, and you are defending you're defending London from the alien invasion. The aliens have come to take over London, and you are fending them off or trying to defeat them with your trusty bazooka. You can tell it's London because the Big Ben is kind of destroyed over here along with the London Eye. I think this is the London Bridge. It has fallen down, and there's the alien ship right in the middle of it. So a pretty ridiculous concept, but fun nevertheless, and gives us a great opportunity for our music. So the music is going to be kind of lighthearted and silly in itself. It's probably meant for a all ages game. This could probably easily be a mobile game or a game on a mobile device. So lighthearted, family friendly, all ages, fun kind of music soundtrack. It is, you can go for a bit of the British London influence here, or you could go, it's an alien invasion, so you could go with a sci-fi theme to it. I do leave the structure of the music open to you, the style of it, how the instrumentation, pretty much the overall sound of the music, but there are specific instructions on how the music is going to be set up and formatted to play back in the game. So let's talk about that. Let's go around a couple of times. Let's talk about the different assets that are provided. When you download this assignment, you get the PDF, which gives you a description of all sorts of different aspects of the game and the project itself, and this is what we'll be talking about now. You also get the movie that I was just showing, the video. You don't always have to play the game. You can just reference the video to get an idea of how things might work. And you also get a copy of the game application. Let's do this. So here's 2D Platformer. Please download the game, test it out, play the game. You get a really good insight into what it's supposed to be and how the music might work in it. Now, the version that you have just has the sound effects, and that's your job, is to create the music, and eventually it will have your own custom music in it. And then next week, you'll replace all of the sound effects with your own sound effects. And when you double click on this, you get this window that more than likely you can just hit play and it would work no problem. If you want to change the size of the window, you can change depending on your screen resolution. You can change how big the window looks. Windowed means that it is in a window. If you turn this off, it is full screen, which may or may not work for you. Or it'll work, but you may or may not like it. And graphics quality, this probably won't make much difference. The graphics of the game are pretty simplified overall. So that probably will work for you on any setting. Then you hit play, and we saw the gameplay there earlier. Let me dive back into this, the PDF, and talk about the specifics and the details of how things are going to work. So when you start through here, there's a project overview that talks about all sorts of different aspects. This is basically what we're talking about right now. Kind of gives you a summary of the ideas that I'm discussing. Game overview talks a little bit about Unity games and the Unity game engine. One important thing to point out is that all of the software that we're talking about this month, the game engines that make the games, audio middleware like Fmod and Wise, which are the audio tools, or let's say game audio tools to work with your music and sounds. All of those software are free. So there's nothing stopping you from downloading them and checking them out, getting access to other game projects that you can tear apart and put your own music into, and kind of expand your portfolio and your demo reel. Just get as much content as possible. 2D platformer games. They have a long lineage in games like Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, modern versions of them, Limbo, Braid, and Jetpack Joyride. Basically, you are progressing through a level, you are jumping from platform and platform, and defeating your enemies in a variety of different ways. Musical style, again, I leave it kind of open overall, but I do have some ridiculous suggestions like maybe Monty Python versus, or Monty Python meets Mars Attacks, or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers, where it's a little bit of that British influence, and also the kind of sci-fi, but campy sci-fi also. It's certainly not serious by any means. Like I said, lighthearted, zany, wacky, all ages, family friendly, but it can be in any genre overall. The instrumentation, I leave the instruments up to you. It does need to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. So it does need to be a full composition that we will structure in a certain way so that it can work in the game. Your melody is going to be a very key aspect to this, because the melody often presents the best development and change over the course of your composition. This is the main thing I want to get to here, is the asset list. This is a really important aspect of this PDF, or of the project, is these are the files that you will deliver. This is very important that you kind of nail down an asset list with a new client, so that you can determine exactly the files that need to be delivered so that you can be paid on that project. It all depends on the approach of how you kind of schedule getting paid over the course of the project, but often there is a set list of deliverables. I will deliver you these 100 sounds, or I will deliver you these 10 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours worth of music, and you will pay me X amount of money. And whether it's kind of by milestone or whether it's by project. An asset list will allow you to nail down exactly the files that are expected from the client. And so these are going to be a total of 9 files that you will ultimately create, compose, and bounce out of into a WAV file and deliver these 9 WAV files for your project on FSO. So this game, the music soundtrack, is divided up into 9 audio files. And those 9 audio files are really 3 different categories or 3 different variations of intros, main loops, and endings. We have 3 categories, and each one of those categories has 3 different variations. So intros are going to build up and start the music. When the game first starts, one of these 3 random intro files will play. They basically have a very similar file name, but with each of the variations at the end. They are 2 bars long. They are 16-bit 44.1 stereo files, so they're all going to be formatted the same way. This is pretty standard, CD quality audio. And the intro files and the ending files, they do not loop, but the 3 main loops, they are set up to loop. So these, when the game starts, it randomly chooses one of these 3 intros, plays it for 2 bars, and then will drop you into the main loops. The main loops are 8 bars long, and they are set up to loop. So that means when they reach the end, they can return back to the top and seamlessly play back over and over and over again to create the sense of a seamless piece of music playing. The game will randomly choose one of them, play it for 8 bars, then randomly choose another one, play it for 8 bars, then keep going and randomly continue to shift and change the music soundtrack. This creates most of the content of the music that is heard during the gameplay. Intro starts it, plays it for 2 bars, and then the game just constantly randomly chooses one of these 3 8-bar loops to play. So let's do this. Oh, where did my video go? There we go. So, game starts. And as soon as Mr. Bean here drops down to the platform, game does start and the music starts. One of those 3 intro files is chosen. It plays it for 2 bars. And then when it reaches the end, it will randomly choose one of those 3 8-bar loops. And then as the game is played, it'll play through, let's say it'll choose main loop 2, play it for 8 bars, then it'll choose main loop 3, then it'll play it for 8 bars, then it'll choose main loop 1, play it for 8 bars, then it'll choose main loop 1 again, and play it for 8 bars, then it'll go back to 3, then it'll go to 2, then it'll play 2. Now, it's completely random, so it can play the same one over and over and over again, but the odds are, it's going to randomly shift between these 3 files. So that creates most of our soundtrack until we have to figure out how to get to these ending files. So the character here has a health meter kind of on top of his head. When it jumps back up here, it's a little easier to see up here. There's a health meter. There are health pickups, but eventually you're going to run out of health and you are going to perish. So you take the last bit of damage. Well, not yet, I guess. Keeps going. All right, so there's barely any health left right here. And this last alien's going to come. As soon as you lose your last bit of health, notice that your gun falls off or falls away. The bazooka kind of disappears. Your hat falls off, and you fall down here into the toxic sludge below, and the game is over. So at this point, main loops are playing all the way through here, And as soon as you lose that last bit of health, the music will stop playing the main loop and transition immediately into one of these three endings. You have three ending cues: music underscore ending underscore 01, 02, and 03. There are also two bars, and they are meant to resolve the music to a strong finish or ending. So you have the intros. Those are two bars. They build up into the main loops. The main loops play, and they constantly loop and shift and kind of randomly play back. Then immediately, as soon as you lose all of your health points, it'll shift. It'll just stop playing. There's no consideration for the which bar you're on, which beat you're on, the fact that it's in sync or in time with anything. It just cuts off the main loop and immediately transitions over to the ending cue. So I have examples. I'm not just going to talk about it the entire time. I do have some things to play here. So let's load those up. That looks correct. Now, let's see if we can hear this. Please let me know if you have any questions so far with 2D platformer, how it might work. Well, I'm also going to be kind of clarifying that a bit also with examples. That always helps. Let's do this. Give me a heads up, then make sure that we can hear this. I want to make sure it plays and you can still hear me and all that stuff. So that looks like it's working. Can you hear that? I just want to jump over here to something that loops. All right, and you can still hear me, and I can turn this down. Okay. So let's make some more room here. Okay, so we have 4 different submissions. These are student examples from previous months. And we have all the way over here on the right, these are all the main loops. These are the 3 8-bar main loops. Over here in this column, these are the 3 intros. And that means over here in this column, these are all the ending cues. And they're just in this order because of this is how they import, like alphabetically, when they come in. So we're going to start by listening to the main loops. We'll probably go through, a couple of these examples and just talk about how things are going to work. So your main loops. First and foremost, they need to loop. There needs to be no gaps, no fades in and out. They need to extend all the way to the end of the file, and they need to make sense when they return back to the top. Let me space them out a little bit. So we have 3 main loops here. Here's the first one. All right, so 8 bars long, drums, tuba as the kind of bass line. We got some other brass as the melody. We got the marimba kind of as the lead line. It loops, meaning it returns when it reaches the end, it returns back to the front. Here's loop 2. Now they're going to play in any sort of order. So they need to be able to connect and be shuffled around into any sort of way. Here's main loop 3. So when we play these together, the end of any one of these cues. The challenge here is when it reaches the end of the first cue that's chosen, it can either jump back to the top, it could jump to the second one, or it could jump to the third one. So you basically have a choice of 3 directions that this music needs to be able to work. That's the randomness, that's the variety that happens. So as the game progresses, it just, like I said, it'll go from 2 to 1 to 3 to 3 to 2 to just any sort of order. It can repeat the same ones, but more than likely it's going to jump around. One of the smartest techniques is to keep return back to the tonic at the front of each one of these cues. Start on a chord that you know is a solid turning point, and you know that when you reach the end, no matter what you do through this chord, it's always going to resolve back to that tonic or back to that first chord. You should maintain the same key and the same tempo and time signature through all 3 of these, or through the whole composition, actually through all 9 files. It needs to feel like the same band, the same instruments playing different parts of the same song. So it can't feel like 3 different pieces of music. It needs to feel like one cohesive composition that's just chopped up into its individual parts. 8 bars long. Choose a tempo, time signature, choose a key. Then choose your instrumentation. The instrumentation should stay the same. It should be the same drum kit, same instrument for bass, a couple of layers for harmony, and then a strong lead line that changes and develops from one to the next, so that you have that development. It's going to be repetitive enough by the fact that they are loops. They are only 8-bar loops, so you don't want to bore the player even more by putting 2 4-bar loops in an 8-bar phrase, or 4 2-bar loops where it's just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then on top of that it repeats again. So you want to use the full 8 bars to develop your melody, to develop your harmony. What else for your main loops? Consistent instrumentation, consistent tempo and key. So the difference is going to be changes in your is going to be the composition. Changes in your melody, changes in your progression, changes in your bass line, changes in your percussion and rhythm, changes like hi-hat pattern changes up a little bit, kick snare pattern changes a little bit, chord progression changes, and then the melody definitely will be a strong kind of voice to each one of the cues. Then the main goal of your intros and your endings are to build up build up the energy heading into the main loops, and the endings are to kind of release it back down and resolve it to the ending. 3 intros. So these don't loop. They only play once at the very beginning of the game. It will randomly choose one of these, and then it those are endings. It will randomly choose an intro, and as soon as that intro is done playing, it will transition into the main loop. So you might get intro 2 to main loop 1. You might get intro 3 to main loop 2. It doesn't always go intro 1, main loop 1, ending 1. They're not combined like that. All 9 files need to feel like they could be combined into any order. Again, that's the challenge. Intro 1, 2, and 3 has to work with main loop 1, 2, and 3, which has to work with ending 1, 2, and 3. Right, so there's one version. We could do that. Oops, we could do this and drag another one over here. So you basically want to build up. You use You want to create a rise in the energy. A lot of times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, where it kind of builds up in that sort of way. Heading into the main loops, it can rise through the intros, maybe hold on some suspension or hit a 4 or 5 chord to fall back and resolve back to that tonic starting into the main loops. You need to build up in volume and energy through the intros so that when it hits the main loop, you're basically at the same intensity level and volume going into there. You should have drums, bass, harmony, melody in your intros. You should use all of the instruments that you're going to be using in the main loops through these intros so that it creates that sense of anticipation heading into the main loops. And then the endings are basically the opposite of that. They need to end and resolve. They need to take what was going on in the main loops. They should start at the same strength and level and then resolve back down to the endings to kind of finish what was happening in the main loops. Ending 1. Ending 2. And ending 3. Now, you want to watch out for getting things cut off at the end. There's cymbal crashes here that just kind of get cut off. Watch out for any instrumentation that would kind of overlap and kind of fall off the end. It's often a really good idea to have some sort of final riff or resolution here, and then actually hit beat 1 of bar 2. So go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and just kind of hold that last note through bar 2 as an ending. Da 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 boom, and just kind of hit that final note. So let's try another one here. Let's see what this one sounds like. This is a different approach overall. All right, so again, drums, bass, harmony, melody. The melody changes. There's decent changes from one to the next. Changes in the drums, changes in the melody, 8-bar phrases. That makes sense in any which way that you would combine them. 3 intros. Now, these are good examples of not good intros. They are poor examples of intros. These are good examples of what maybe not to do in intros. They sound fine. I mean, they're kind of interesting. But they're not very much of an intro. They don't rise or build in intensity. This one's like a 2-bar loop. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just kind of flat in its intensity all the way across. This one, it builds a little bit, but it's just a little snare roll at the end. You should use the entire 2 bars and all of the instrumentation, drums, bass, harmony, melody, to build up and rise to the point of the main loops. And then 3 endings. These endings do work well. They, again, use the first bar to resolve and then hit that final, hit a final note or chord on beat 1 of bar 2. Right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And it holds a little bit and sustains and gives enough room for everything to decay to silence. Let me do this one here. Oops. Let's try this one. All right. Again, so another electronic approach. This one has a strong lead line that changes from one to the next, and also the percussion changes nicely. Now the lead's kind of a little bit wandering overall, but it does present a change. Three intros. Those are more like traditional like EDM intros with white noise and kick build and stuff like that. Here's three endings. This is mainly why I like this example, because it uses more effects for the endings overall. There's a little bit of delay. So some interesting endings overall, instead of just using a musical resolution, using effects to end the music. Where I've heard some interesting things. It is the ending. You just lost. You just kind of lost control. The character just kind of drops off, and the game, that round is over, and it'll restart. So I've heard some interesting things with the music kind of decaying and breaking down, where it either goes into a bit crusher or distortion, or hits some note and goes off into big reverb or a delay, or that sort of approach overall. Hold on a sec. All right. So hopefully this gives you a couple of ideas and some insight into how you might approach this game project. A couple of other things. What else can I come up with? Suggestions for composition. Compose interesting loops. The music, by the fact that it's going to be looping and playing around, is going to be repetitive enough on its own. So use the full 8 bars to develop a melody, develop a progression that changes from one to the next. Too much repetition kind of breeds boredom through the music. Transitions. The music needs to transition smoothly from intros through all of the different main loops and into the endings. The transitions should be seamless. No hiccups or pops or clicks or gaps in the playback of everything. You want the player basically to be invisible to the player as to the progression of the music. As I mentioned before, keeping the same key and the same tempo and time signature throughout will prevent any sort of interruptions or changes or inconsistencies in the rhythm. Continuous loops. I mentioned that. No pops or clicks, no gaps or fades. Overall mix. You ultimately have control of the mix. You are creating both the music and sound effects. So you need to create the music with the intention that the sound effects are also going to be playing. So nothing kind of overloading and distorting the output. You don't. A lot of times I'll see compressors and limiters put on like the master, and it just cranked in there, and it flattens out and loses the dynamic range. Or on the other side of that, some people bounce out their files. It sounds great in their studio. They have it turned up, but when they bounce the files, they have these little tiny waveforms that they turn in. So you want to watch out. You want to, you'll see when you deliver everything, you'll have to bring your files into the DAW and take screenshots of the WAV files. Pay attention to the levels of your music and make sure that you have proper dynamic range to have not only your music playing by itself, but also the sound effects involved. You should definitely test out how your music works in the game. And you can do this using the game application. Where did that go? Here we go. The 2D platformer game application. This, most Mac applications are really a folder that you can dive into and check out some of the assets. So you can right click on 2D platformer and choose show package contents. And you can go, which gives you a nicely named folder called contents. Go into contents, go into data. And inside data, you'll find streaming assets. Inside of streaming assets, you will find two folders, music and sound effects. Sound effects will be filled with all of the sound effects that you are hearing in the game. Music will be empty, and that is your job. You will be creating all of these 9 music files. I don't expect you to remember that folder until you'll be doing this quite a bit. You'll probably get quite used to it. But first off, right off the bat, we give you a kind of a folder path to that location, and find that folder, place your music there, and then run the game application, and you will hear your music playing back. Test out your music, make sure it plays back correctly. You'll take a screenshot of everything, and you'll deliver your 9 files up to FSO. You'll basically take your screenshot and also have the 9 files, zip that up, and deliver that to or on FSO. All right. So that is our first game project. Please check out the game, download it, make sure it works for you. Come prepared on Thursday with any on Wednesday with any questions that you might have for this project. Week 2. No, that's next week. Week 3, second half of the month. Our second game is called Angry Bots, and it is a futuristic first-person shooter. It is, let's see here. Let's do this. Futuristic first-person shooter. It's also made by Unity Games. You are a mercenary infiltrating a robot factory, and the robots are none too happy that you are there. Has a different setup for the music, a different approach overall to how the music works. There are 3 different types of robots in this game, and you'll have a musical theme for each one. That music will shift and change according to whatever aspect that you want to control. That will change by the battles, and we'll talk about the overall approach to this game being the concept of ambient and action. There are parts of this game when you're just wandering around and you don't hear or you don't encounter any of the enemies, but once you go into battle, there is action music that is heard at that point. And how do we shift and change the music between lower intensity ambient music to higher intensity action music? So we got a couple different robots. This is the mech robot that you will encounter. The other ones are called the spider bots. And so lots of different fun game projects to work on through the month. Your production technique. We will talk about this on Wednesday. I'll go through a couple of different approaches for looping your music, and you'll go through 3 different techniques of topping and tailing a loop, or bouncing MIDI loops, and also editing loops out of material that's not easily loopable. So you will be referencing these techniques in all of the projects that you will work through this month. It's a very key component to developing a music soundtrack for a game. Loops are very, very important. So we'll probably start out our next session with that. Also get into any questions that might come up. You will, all of your assignments are due on Sunday of this week, and then next Monday we'll load them up for a bit of peer review and discussion of what you guys came up with. So stick around if you have any questions. Please let me know. But other than that, the archive is released every week. After our Monday session, and our Wednesday session, it'll be released on Tuesday and Thursday. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.